All right. And welcome, Tanya, to A Cup of Clarity. It's so wonderful to have you here today.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here and excited for our conversation.
I am too, because you come with a wealth of knowledge. You have been doing this kind of work in this field for, correct me if I'm wrong, over 20 years or over 25?
Over 27, actually.
Okay.
Yeah,
It was
yeah,
short by a few. Over
yeah,
27
yeah.
years as a
Uh-huh.
psychotherapist, as a clinical social worker, and as a coach.
Yes.
So you come with what I love is just a great balance of pulling in different disciplines into
Mhm.
the work that you do. And I'd like for you to really start to talk to us a little bit about how you decided to become a therapist. I know it has a little something to do with your own journey in your 20s, right? Going
Yeah.
to therapy for the first time. So tell us a little bit about what made you go to therapy to begin with, and then tell us your journey of reaching where you are now.
Yeah. So when I was in my mid-20s, I was struggling to have a long-term love relationship, and I really didn't understand what was in the way for me. And
Mm.
I would think occasionally about whether or not therapy would be helpful. But at that time, I felt a lot of stigma connected to it. And I
Mm.
also had this idea that my problems weren't legitimate enough, or they weren't the kind of problems that people would go to therapy for. But with little evolution as I continued on in my life, I did start to open up to the idea and got some names of therapists and ended up with a lovely therapist named Bonnie, who I felt very quickly seen and heard. And that was so reassuring and
So
healing.
important.
So
So
important.
important to make
Yeah.
that right connection with the right
Ah,
person.
yeah, yeah. And from there, as I got to know her a bit, she suggested that I add group therapy to the mix, which she also ran the group. So I agreed, although the
Mm.
idea of it did terrify me. The
I
thought
could
of
see that.
being so vulnerable in the way that I was with her, with people I didn't know, really scared me. But I did trust her and I was intrigued actually. So I decided to go ahead and do that. And I joined this group, and the combination was so life changing. I was a graphic designer at the time when I went to into this into therapy and this process, and I went into it feeling very flawed. When I was trying to
Mm.
understand better what was in the way for me in love relationships, the inner critic in me, the part of me that was making up reasons for that, was, telling myself that I must be the problem and I was very flawed. But that experience of going in, seeing other people on their personal growth journeys, seeing people I admired on their
Wow.
personal growth journeys saying some similar worries about themselves helped me let go of that as being something that was wrong with me, and opening up to the idea that there's a lot that goes along with this being human,
Yes.
and that just not seeing myself as flawed, but just starting to really connect with myself and get to know myself better, learn about needs, that kind of thing. And it changed my life. And so soon after that, I actually did meet my husband early on in that process. And we just celebrated our 30-year anniversary of being married.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And so that part happened. That was why I went to therapy. That's why I did the group. That part happened fairly early on. The part I didn't expect was really connecting to myself,
Mhm.
learning about needs, learning I wasn't flawed, being able to show up and be human and go through the ups and downs that life has for all of us. And so I went back to school, and that's when I became a licensed clinical social worker and have been doing that work ever since, really wanting to dedicating my life to helping other people transform in their lives and connect to themselves in that kind of a way.
What a wonderful journey. I mean, to have gone to therapy on your own because it was something you needed, and then for it to just really have impacted you in such a way that you are now the therapist helping others, therapist and coach, because I think you mentioned you do both. I
Yes.
love that you took the chance on group therapy, even though it was something that felt a little, right, strange. But I think
Mhm.
in group sessions like that, you feel a sense of I'm not alone. Am I right about that? Where
Totally.
you're like, you're listening to other people say things and you say, wow, I thought I was the only one that felt this way or had this issue or was scared about such and such. And all of a sudden, here are some other people chiming in. And all of a sudden, I don't feel so alone in
Uh,
this quest.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's so powerful to realize you're not alone. And I think so many people do think they're alone. So just
Yeah.
knowing that in an emotional way as you're having that experience is so powerful.
Yeah, it just opens up the door for healing, which is
Yeah.
what I titled today's episode, and it's titled Inner Healing and Growth. And I want to ask you, even though times have changed so much, and I think when it comes to mental health, uh, there's not the stigma that it used to be, and I think everyone is more open to it. But yet, why do you feel that some people are still hesitant to, make the phone call or search up someone and reach out and take that step to finding a good therapist?
Yeah, I think it can feel so daunting. And if you don't yet have somebody that you have a connection to, I think somebody can often think, well, maybe I'm not going to connect to that person. Is that person, am I going to feel safe in that environment? Am I going to be able to connect? And I also think there's something about acknowledging that things are as difficult as they are, letting the help in feels like, I don't know. I think it's similar to what I experienced back when I started of feeling flawed, feeling maybe unlovable, or feeling like there's something wrong with somebody who's deciding to take that step. That if you don't take it yet, maybe you're not acknowledging how bad it is. But then if you
Mm.
take that step, you are acknowledging that you're struggling. And yeah, so I think it's just so um, tender, you
Yeah,
know? Yeah.
yeah. I think it comes from a place of just letting go, kind of surrendering to what is, as you said, it's the human condition, and we're all humans, and we're all
Hmm.
whole but flawed, right? In one way
Yeah.
or the other. And so I think taking that first step is so courageous
Yeah. Yeah.
to
There's, I'm sorry.
no, go right ahead.
I was going to say there's something about that too. I think people can be very private about it still, even though there's a lot less stigma connected to it. And so I think sometimes taking that step, feeling like, well, other people don't have to take this kind of a step. Sometimes, I mean, sometimes people are very open about it and comfortable sharing it, but a lot of times we keep it private. So I think people can take a step thinking, oh, they're admitting to struggling more than what they think people around them are struggling like,
Yeah.
until they open up about it and then find, oh, the people that they're surrounded with that aren't talking about it might share a little bit more as that conversation goes into that more vulnerable place, and
Yeah.
realize that we're more aligned than we think.
Absolutely. I mean, I personally started my journey with therapy at the age of 19. And it was soon after, I don't know if I shared this with you before, but I ended up with a facial paralysis called the Bell's palsy from tremendous amounts of stress. I've shared it on my podcast before and on my website. And 19, when you think, this is like such a fun time, you're in college, it's all fun and games, but I was just someone who really just absorbed stress left and right. And so that was my first uh, journey into therapy. And then later on, many years after, when I went through my divorce, that was a time I needed a lot of support. And I had
Mhm.
a wonderful therapist who helped me for some time, to sort of help me see, just to navigate that transition in life.
Mhm.
So let's assume we have somebody that realizes there's something a little, kind of going on. They feel a little stuck, and they'd like to find a starting point. They want to do some inner discovery work on their own before starting to see a professional. What would you suggest? They know that there's things that aren't feeling great with them, and they want to start that inner healing journey. Where would you suggest they start on their own,
Yeah.
perhaps?
Yeah. There are so many different resources out there nowadays that can be a nice way to dip your toe in. I mean, things like your podcast that helps
Thank you.
people really explore their own sort of what do they need to feel more clear in their lives, that kind of thing. I think journaling is such an
Mm,
amazing
agree.
tool. Yeah, and I think that there's various ways to do journaling, and I think finding your own way could be a way to start tracking what is coming up for you. When are you feeling maybe overwhelmed with some things, or feeling like your mood is taking a downturn, and getting some clarity on what might be in the way for you. Um, there are other resources. I mean, there are people on Instagram, for example, and I don't want to suggest that that's a replacement for
Right, I
therapy
agree.
or coaching. But what I want to say is there's some really wonderful ideas out there as we're exploring our own personal growth, mental health, that can help us just process, what is that for me? And exploring some of those resources. There's somebody who has an amazing, um, besides me, and I'll tell you about that later, but there's
Please.
somebody who has an amazing Instagram following, the holistic psychologist,
Yes, I
and she
follow
does
her
a
as well.
beautiful job of explaining things so
Yes.
clearly. And she has some communities that at certain times of the year you're able to join and be a part of. So I
Mm,
think she's wonderful, but finding somebody that really resonates as a way to get your mind going, get
right,
yourself understanding some of your own stuff before maybe making a decision to work with somebody or not, but to get that process
right.
going.
I agree. I agree. It's kind of like, you look at some of these things on Instagram, like you said, some post and you kind of go, huh, or you like it, or you comment on it, or you share it with someone. And obviously it resonated with you in one way or another. And that's a great point to take to a journaling exercise. That same thing. Well, okay, they're talking about anxious attachment. I've never heard of that before.
Mhm.
Let me see what she says about that. And where in my life have I seen this happen before? And you just start opening, yourself up to new information and to kind of releasing some of the stuff that may have a hold on you. Which brings me to your own Instagram post. I've really been I think your Instagram page is wonderful, and you do a variety of things that are helpful and just really make you think. And one of the posts that you had to do about patterns in life and how we can 3 steps on how we can change a pattern in our lives. Would you
Yeah.
share those with us?
Sure. First of all, thank you for saying that. I appreciate your kind words about I've been working on sort of putting myself out there in that way, and it's new. So in changing a pattern, the 3 steps that I really highlighted, first of all, is awareness. If we don't
Mm,
know that there's a pattern that we want to change, we're not going to be able to make the change at that level. So
right.
having that kind of awareness is huge. And I think sometimes when people have that awareness, they focus on the negative because they're not thrilled about the pattern itself. But I would like to celebrate that a bit and say just having the awareness
It's
is a
true.
huge first step. So let's celebrate that. And then the second thing is really to notice, well, what does come up for you? What comes up for you when you are engaged in this pattern, whatever it is, people pleasing tendencies, substance use, um, perfectionism, that kind of thing. What does come up for you when you're noticing that pattern? Get your why really, really strong.
Mm,
So, the flip side of that is to get your vision as clear as you can. What do you see instead? What's a pattern that you think would serve you better if you were if you were able to shift this pattern into something different, and try and get a vision of that? What does that look like? And then the third step is trial and error. And
mm,
it takes some time, and
yeah.
be kind to yourself. Give yourself some grace. Know that patterns don't change overnight. And pay attention to things like your energy levels. What's your rhythm like? Are you better in the morning? Are you better at night? That kind of thing as you're trying to bring a new pattern into being. And then one thing I would say though, if you're doing all of these things and the pattern itself is not changing, and you're feeling sort of this repetitive nature of wanting to go at it, but it's not shifting, there's likely either a limiting belief or some kind of healing that needs to take place before you're going to be able to change the pattern. So I would go back again and try and get underneath the wish to change the pattern and to explore that, to see whether or not there's something that feels like it needs a little more tenderness and a little bit more time and energy.
Yeah, it's about, I think, getting very honest with ourselves when we start any journey like this of self-discovery and self-awareness and so on and healing. It's about I like what you said about knowing your vision and your why. Why am I starting this? What is it that I hope to accomplish? And 100% agree with awareness. It's
Mhm.
really one of the greatest tools that we have at our disposition for changing our lives. If you don't know
Yeah.
that you don't know that you don't know, nothing can change until you're aware of where to go with that. Your work really has a lot to do with helping your clients align their inner world with their outer world. And I'd like for you to elaborate a little bit, on that. And what are some things we can do to get into alignment?
Yeah. So I just did a post, I do these lives Tuesdays with Tanya on the Instagram page, and I just did mine about alignment today. And I think the reason why I talk about it so much is it's very connected to us living lives that are satisfying for us.
Mm,
If we're out of alignment, first of all, energetically, we're showing up in this kind of muddied way because we might be thinking about doing something that we're not in alignment with. So we're not thrilled about doing it, or feeling some resentment, or wanting something else, and in our minds wishing for something different than what's happening. And so
right.
that impacts how we show up energetically. And that then can impact what we do attract to ourselves. Because if we're out of alignment and we're sort of showing up in this very muddied way, we're not going to pull the things that we think we want towards us in that
Hmm.
way. Um, so being in alignment, it helps us flow. And I think that even when we're doing something, so with everything, there are different tasks involved as we're taking on new goals, new directions, whatever it might be. And we don't love every single one of them. But when we're doing something we're not thrilled about, but we know we're in alignment with that. So let me think of an example. I guess I'm thinking, for example, when I had my daughters, there's a lot of work involved in raising
Yes.
these kids that's exhausting, but I was always so, so clear that I wanted to be their mom and to be on that path. And so even though there were things I didn't love doing about that, I was very clear that I was in alignment. And there's something about that that gives us a certain amount of energy because
Mm,
we're connected to a bigger purpose than
right.
we're clear about that. Yeah, and I think when we're out of alignment, we're spending our time and energy doing things that either we don't want to be doing for ourselves. It could be that we're um, working too much at a quick pace, doing too many things, and that's not satisfying. Or
Yeah.
perhaps we're doing tasks or social events that we're not interested in doing. And so our quality of life is all sort of cluttered up with this other stuff that we don't want to be doing.
And I think, piggybacking on what you said, one of the activities that I do a lot with coaching clients is getting very clear on your core values.
Mm.
Understanding what is it that's highly important to you in your life. What is it that you value? What are like the truths that you live by? And they have get this long list of things. They got to narrow it down. And a lot of times it's kind of like a little bit of an eye opener because they'll say, I value this and I value that. And all of a sudden they realize, oh, I'm not living the values. I'm not putting my energy into those things. And so this is why I feel stuck, or I feel, bitterness here or resentment there because of XYZ. Is that something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's great to help people sort of see Because I think that's part of what happens is we lose track. We're so busy living our
Mhm.
day-to-day lives and just going on to the next thing and
Yeah.
feeling that there are things that we're responsible for without really asking some of the deeper questions of which are the things that we're not going to really put ourselves into and which are the things that we're going to make sure to honor that space for. And I think what you're saying is a great way to do that is to help people identify their core values so that they can recognize it more quickly.
Yeah, and that's a whole nother topic for a whole nother conversation when it comes to knowing your boundaries, right?
Yeah, yeah.
To say, "Okay, I'm gonna set a boundary here because that doesn't align with my inner world and my values," and
Hmm.
knowing when to say no, right? But that's, like I
Yeah,
said, that's another topic for another day. There's a lot of reasons why we don't set boundaries. Tanya, I feel like one of the big topics these days, and I see it come up a lot in my readings and different things in mental health, is talking about regulation, right? Being able to regulate. So tell us a little bit from your perspective why regulation is so important and what are some ways that we can regulate our emotions and our nervous system?
yeah. Regulation is so important because it interferes when we're dysregulated, it interferes with our ability to process things. So we may show up in anger or rage, or we might be sort of crumbling at certain things because we're dysregulated. And from that space, we can't make good decisions. We can't show up the way that we want to show up. And so I think when you're noticing your own patterns, we can all get dysregulated in different ways from different things that might be triggering to us. So, knowing what your own rhythms are is really important. What is
Right.
something that when you're sort of exposed to it, it can lead to very intense feelings that are more about maybe past traumas or more about your own development than it is about the situation itself. And what do you need to do in your life to be able to protect yourself if you know you're going to be exposed to something that's going to be triggering, or to help yourself recover? I think so. Number one, knowing your patterns is always
Yeah.
so helpful, and knowing triggers is really important, that kind of thing. And then the other, we can't always be proactive about
Yeah.
these things, right?
Yeah, it's gonna happen, and that's when
Right.
you say we have to be self-compassionate, say, "Listen, okay, I got upset," and again, analyze the situation, but be kind to yourself.
That's right, that's right, and I catch myself saying that so much about be kind to yourself, because we are very unkind to ourselves
True,
often. People really get to this place, even if you're not noticing it, it can be insidious, like where they start to beat up on themselves. So, yes, be
true.
very kind to yourself and start to develop your own ways of bringing yourself grounding yourself. So, breath is an amazing tool. There's lots of different ways to use breath. And so, maybe to research a little bit. I just personally focus on getting a deeper breath and following that breath. For
Yeah,
me, that's what helps ground me. I know people do box breathing, which I guess is breathing in for 4,
4,
holding for
holding for
4,
4.
breathing out for 4, holding for 4, and sort of continuing that. So there's various ways to use breath. I think just different calming, grounding activities can be super helpful. So taking even a 5-minute break, going to sit outside, go for a bit
In the
of a
sun,
walk. Yeah, the nature is amazing. If you
nature.
can get any bit of nature, the sun, yes.
Absolutely. To me,
Yeah,
that's peace right there.
yeah, yeah.
Even in a city as noisy as mine, Miami, it's still we could just get out to a park and at least it changes. I think it shifts your energy from whatever
Yeah,
you're feeling, and it's not a coping mechanism, it's an actual good strategy to go and just, like you said, take that break,
yeah.
breathe, and kind of come back to center.
Yeah, yeah. So, and then figure out what your go-to things are that are going to help you calm down. And even keeping a list sometimes can be really helpful, because if for any of us, if we're dysregulated, sometimes we can't even think of them, even if they're fairly basic and simple. So having a list that we can just go to the list can help us choose something that we know, oh, that helps to ground me. Let me go do that thing.
Absolutely. For someone who might be going through a life transition right now, and many of us go through little transitions and big transition, and some might be a stressful transition, like maybe starting a brand new job, which can be scary, or moving to a brand new house or a new city, or it could be a joyful one, like having a baby or getting married, right? What advice can you offer the listeners on how to navigate life's transitions? And a lot of times they're just inevitable. It's
Yeah. Yeah. I would say, first of all, again, this is where the be kind to yourself can show up. When we're going through a transition, good or bad, big or small, there's often a lot of chaotic energy that gets connected to that. And literal sort of clutter and chaos also can be part of that. I
yeah.
remember when my kids were born and babies, how piled up our dining room table used to get, because I couldn't deal with a bunch of things. So first of all, just be kind to yourself and adjust. I mean, as we're going through big transitions or littler ones, we need time and space to be able to do the different things that are new and we
Right.
hadn't been doing before. And so to give yourself time and space, similar to the pattern change, what do you need? How is your rhythm changing? What's different? I think writing a list of everything that you think you can think of that might need your attention, and then keeping that as a running list, not as a to-do list, because that can be really
Yeah.
overwhelming, but but more as a capturing list. Like, just know that you're capturing, and you can transfer things to a to-do list as you have time to do some of these tasks. But what happens is, if we don't put it somewhere and trust that we have it captured, in our brains, we're going to keep trying to hold on to it and make sure we're not forgetting it, and just spend a lot of energy in that space. So if you can put it somewhere and trust that you can let go, that can be really helpful. And then go at a slow pace, pick one
Yeah.
thing and do one thing at a time and make decision about what's next. And honestly, if you're not sure what the most important thing is and you've got a lot of things and you're trying to decide, but they all feel kind of equal, flip a coin. I
Yeah.
think
Why not?
movement in this place is gonna be more important than picking the absolute perfect priority,
Right.
especially if you're not sure. I mean, if you know something's more important, then that's more urgent, and then do that. Um, but I would say that making that choice of what the priority is could require some intuition, and
Mhm.
that goes back to some of those grounding exercises, because if we're too revved up and trying to manage so many things at once and feeling
I know.
overwhelmed, it's going to be tough to make that decision in a way that really honors us. So working on calming back down and then making that decision can be more effective.
Yeah. I can relate to that because in life transitions, I remember when I moved, when I got married and moved to a new house, I wanted it all done yesterday. I wanted every box put away. And I've never been someone, as I've gotten older, I've gotten much better at this, but I was never someone in my young 20s, 30s, 40s that was really good at asking for help.
Hmm.
So I would say another thing I guess we could add to your wonderful list is be okay with asking for help. Asking
Yeah.
people for help in whatever it is that you need, just someone to maybe vent to, or to listen to you, or
Mhm.
to just be there to support you, or to actually come and help you. Because it took me a long time to be able to learn to do that in life, and learn to just slow down, as you said, know that all of it doesn't have to get done right away. So
Right.
that's I love the putting it down on a list, and not a to-do list, because then that
Right.
gets overwhelming. We don't want to
Too
call it
much.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, one of the other questions I had for you was, why do you feel that so many people have such a hard time giving themselves permission to just enjoy the simple pleasures in life? And it goes back to this: when you're so busy, right? And you've got so much
Mhm.
going on, whether it's a life transition or just life in general, just that pausing and enjoying things that bring you joy. Why do we find it to be so hard to give ourselves permission to
Yeah.
just be?
I think that there is something about this always striving for success and comparing yourself to other people.
So
And
true.
as a culture, we put productivity up on this pedestal of like, what did you
Yep.
get done? And that there is this way that I think so many of us feel like we have to earn our downtime. We have to earn our
Mm,
simple pleasures, and we're not. And I think that's part of the limiting beliefs, part of our cultural narratives that needs healing. It's a cultural issue. And I think that what can happen is we might be working on something, but when it's not supported in the world outside of how we're working, it just is harder to move forward. It doesn't mean you can't do it. And I think if you go back to the changing patterns and have your why really, really strong, then you might be able to do a better job, or you should be able to do a better job of making that sacred for yourself. If simple
mm,
pleasures is something you're aware of, like, "Oh, I'm not doing a great job with that. I want to do better with that. I'm going to make that a priority every day and have a commitment to that," then that's going to help you have success with that. But without that awareness and vision, it's so easy to get caught up in sort of the rat
yeah.
race and sort of that intense energy that we see around us so much of the time.
Yeah. Little by little, I think we're starting, or at least just people I follow and people I relate to, where it's not all about speed. It's not all
Mhm.
about how much are you getting done. It's not about productivity. It's about the journey,
Yeah.
and what you can learn along the way in the journey and what you're receiving from it and how your health is doing. Because, yeah,
Mhm.
great, you did got everything done on your list, but right now you're just mush on your bed
Yeah,
because you're so exhausted mentally, physically, spiritually, everything.
that's right.
So I wish I had the magic wand, and I'm sure you probably do too, of how we can just switch that culture. But I think it's
Yeah.
having conversations like this, I think, is a start. And little by little, for those of us that serve in these capacities on our Instagram accounts, to sort of just say, listen, there is so much value in taking care of yourself and in slowing down in life and just really just savoring your moments, because
Yeah.
they can be gone in a flash.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you're saying too about having reminders, like if we use social media for good and curate who we follow, so that
Mhm.
gets reinforced throughout sort of the moments that we connect to whoever it is, books that we're reading, podcasts that
Yeah,
we're listening to, and Instagram pages that we follow. So that gets reinforced again and again. It's so helpful.
absolutely. Wow. So, Tanya, all guests answer this final question. And because it's called a cup of clarity, it's a clarity question. So, what has been a recent or, moment of clarity for you in your life, and what did it teach you?
Yeah. So recently I think you and I may have chatted about it a bit. I went to Italy on this mostly women's retreat with this amazing person named Jennifer Pasteloff. And that was just such a beautiful place to be. And the community that came together to do this retreat was
Yeah,
so powerful and healing. And so, like I suggest to all my clients, I was doing my own personal growth work while I
agreed.
was there, and that's not easy to do. And sitting with some of the feelings that came up for me, and I would say the biggest thing that I took away for myself was just a reminder, because these issues aren't new, just revisiting them from a different
Right.
place in my life and reminding myself, because I think I have this tendency to feel like, oh, I need to fit in with everybody and I need to figure out what's everybody doing so that I can fit in so the most seamlessly.
Mhm.
And I'm definitely an introvert. And I caught myself, started to think a little bit in those terms, and I'm like, wait a minute, and come back to myself and remind myself again to check in with myself for inner guidance and to allow myself to be however I show up, whether it
Yeah,
matches how other people are showing up or not, that's not relevant. The relevance is for me to check in with myself first. So it was a big reminder to come back to myself and to trust that The way that I show up as
Yeah.
fully as possible is the way that I wanna live my life, and to kind of just reinforce that.
Yeah. Wow, what a wonderful moment of, aha for you,
Yeah.
and in such a beautiful setting, surrounded by like-minded people. How
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah,
Yeah,
beautiful.
and I think that's great, that we each show up with our own voice. My life coach from many years ago taught me, there's enough to go around for everybody. If we believe in abundance, right?
Mhm.
There's enough clients for everyone, there's enough followers for everyone, and, we will resonate with the people that resonate with us, and so
Mhm.
that's why I think I agree with you, it's important to just show up, in your most fully expressed version of yourself, and unique, and we talked about that. I love
Yeah.
some of the things that you do in your thing that are very unique to you, and I haven't seen anyone else do it, so
Yeah.
I always end with what I call the recommended segment. So I'm going to ask you just three categories, and you're going to tell me simply what you recommend in each of those to the listener. So I'm sure you're a reader, much like I am. What's a book, Tanya, that you recommend?
So I just mentioned Jennifer Pasloff, who did this retreat, but she wrote a book, and this is how I connected to her, called On Being Human. And it resonated so strongly for me that I recommend that book. I just think her voice, as she's sharing her own journey from being kind of stuck towards embracing her humanness and shining from that place, was just really healing for me personally.
And then you got to meet her in person and do the retreat. What a great,
Yeah,
like, full circle.
yeah.
I wrote that down because that's not a book I'm familiar with. What is a product that you use and love and would love to share with the audience?
There's a product that I actually use it when I run. So I run, smaller retreats, but I run some retreats, but I think it would be really cool to do it on your own as well, which is dissolvable paper. And it's real, I don't even know what the original purpose is. You can find it on Amazon or other places, but all it is just paper. You literally can put it in water and it dissolves. So it's a beautiful, fun way to let go of things. If there's
Ooh,
something that you're really wanting to let go of, and to very deliberately kind of do a little bit of a, I don't know, like a little ritual with yourself to help yourself be clear on what you wanna let go of, and then do dissolve it in that paper,
and
can
see
be
it
a beautiful.
disappear.
Yeah,
A
yeah,
lot safer than burning it too,
yeah, it's true.
which is what a lot of people do is set fire to the paper.
Yes, yes.
Um, and then my final, category is Netflix. Anything just fun, anything you're watching or follow that you'd like to share?
My husband and I watched a little bit ago, but I think this is one we enjoyed a lot, Inventing Anna on Netflix.
Yes, that
Yeah.
was great.
That was
Yeah,
really engaging, and, yeah, I love watching it. I love things that are kinda based on some truth. I don't know how much of it
right.
was true, but I
Yes.
I love that because it just kinda takes away that question of, like, "Could this really happen?" Like,
Yeah.
"Well."
Did she really,
Yeah,
like, do all
yeah,
that? And it yeah,
yeah,
I agree. Just fun. After a
yeah,
long day, you don't have to think, and it's not a cerebral movie, just a fun thing to take in and
yeah.
enjoy. Tanya, do you have
Yes.
any final words, for our audience when it comes to inner healing, growth, mental health, any of it?
I think that just being on this journey is not easy, and we've talked about being kind to yourself, but to know that as you're moving forward and going towards any kind of transformation, there can be a lot of discomfort connected to
Mm,
that. So, to whatever you need to nurture yourself through the process is going to be an important piece of that. So it could be just getting support from friends, or doing a little bit of facing some difficult things and then give yourself the afternoon off or something. But
yeah,
to really support yourself going through something that's difficult, but life-changing in the best possible way.
absolutely. And so how can someone connect with you if they'd like to?
So I have, Instagram and TikTok actually are the same handles, which is Tanya the Therapist, all one word. Yes,
Yep, and I have it
that's
there for you.
it. Yeah, thank you. And that would be amazing. And also, I have a website, which is my name, but my name's a bit tricky. So, Group with Tanya, Tanya. And on the website is a little documentary of the story that I shared with you about what led to my becoming a therapist. It's only like 10
Wonderful.
minutes long. So, if anybody's interested to sort of see that story, that's on my website. And I have a free discovery session if there's anybody that's interested in exploring group and wants to hear how group might be helpful for them personally.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for being here. I know you are a busy person out there in New York where you're coming in from, and I just really appreciate this conversation and all the wisdom and information that you shared with our listeners today. So it's been a pleasure having you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for doing this podcast. I love it.
I appreciate it. I love it. And for you, the listener, I hope this episode sparked the insight within. Again, to learn a little bit more about Tanya and her work, visit her website. It's Tanya Cole-Lesnick.com, and follow her on social media on Instagram, where I follow her, Tanya the Therapist. Remember, you can watch the full episode on my YouTube channel. Just search up Jeanette Melian. Until next time, I send you love and light. May your cup be full and overflowing.